I was to say one underrated thing about remote work is how retentive it is. It would typically take people getting, offers of 40% more to change to a different working model, even to go in a couple of days a week. And sometimes that's because people maybe have a bit of anxiety, or they're, a little bit on the agoraphobic edge or whatever like that. It definitely attracts people like that. But that makes it really retentive that you can, work, contribute to society. You're still valued. You still have that home and work persona. It is incredibly retentive once you've got people through the door. One thing we've really focused on is being able to be very straight with people about that, go there and work for more money, go into the office 5 days a week, or bluntly, butt your ideas up and deliver more, because, we're giving you a pretty good benefit. Because again, there's a lot of chat about it, but I still would be surprised to see the numbers are as high as you would imagine by looking on LinkedIn about how many companies are actually fully remote. It's still rarer than you think.
Hey Liam, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Chris, thanks.
No, have you been enjoying the little bit of heat we've had? Oh, now it's gone actually, but...
No, it's still really nice down here, so yeah,
is it?
I will be down at the beach with the dog later. Oh. So we're lucky we live on the Isle of Wight, so very close to the beach.
Nice. Every time we speak, you just make me more jealous. You get to go out on... That must... Have you just gotten used to it? Or can you still really appreciate it? Because I still really appreciate it. Yeah, So it's so nice. And just send the kids off down the beach. It's super nice. Where were you before?
We moved here from London.
That's a change, amazing change.
It was a big change. But my wife grew up here, so we were close to family and stuff here. But yeah, it was a pretty big change.
Yeah, my one of my employees' parents live there. And he always travels back there, and he's just like, it's such an escape from all of the noise and chaos of London. I'm not quite kind of where you are, but I just moved out to Kent recently from London, and even that's just so nice, like taking a break, especially after the pandemic, being stuck in a small apartment during that time. You kind of start to appreciate it a bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that it's an island, it just makes it a little bit different. It obviously gets much busier in the summer and stuff. Yeah.
I bet you're like, oh, summer's coming. They're all coming.
I don't know. I quite like it. Gives it a bit of life.
Yeah. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit about your background and then sort of the journey to the role that you're in now.
Sure. So my current role, I'm like head of HR for media agency ClickOut Media. My background in HR, I joined as a recruitment agent, so I did that for a number of years, and I ended up moving to do in-house recruitment, mainly in startups. And then as those businesses grew, my role got a bit broader, not just doing talent acquisition, but other parts of HR. So I moved into a more generalist HR leadership role, and now run HR for the business I'm with today. So my journey is probably not a traditional one. My sort of background has much more been around recruitment, systems, data, rather than that traditional business partnering. So that's, as I've sort of changed my role, they're the bits that I'm still learning, still learning today. But I think that's sort of been good for me, is just bringing that relentless focus on having the right person in the job, and that everything else sort of stems from that, really.
Yeah, which is the bit that you spent most of your career doing. So
I'm probably like 50-50 now, but you sort of don't really lose that buzz of recruitment, really. I don't think even though I'm not so involved with it today.
Some people, you either love it or hate it. A lot of my friends grew up in when the booming days of recruitment, when we graduated. Like everyone went into recruiting, and some people completely thrived in that environment. Others were like, it's just too intense
Yeah.
to do that. But the skills that you learn and the resilience and during recruitment is so important for so many other aspects of your role. I have the same background in terms of being in sales for 10 years. I attribute all of our success for those skills that I learned early on in my career. Interestingly for you though, like many leaders, once they go into the startup space, they find it really challenging. Not many survive. What would you say is it about the startup culture and companies that you work for that's kept you really engaged over the years?
I think I've worked for a couple of sort of like pretty like bootstrapped startups.
Yeah.
I spent a little bit of time at Siemens, so totally the opposite end of the scale. And then, the company I was at previous to this, Kindred Group, I think when I was there, we grew from like 550 up to around 2,500 people over the 10 years I was there. So you sort of see like all of that energy of startup, like, how you grow, how you take on new challenges, new markets, deliver new products for customers. So you still get that energy, but as a HR function, you've got to deliver scalability. And I really enjoy that delivering of scalability and constantly being able to think, what's next? So how do we, we're at stage A today, but I need to be ready. I need to make the business ready for stage B, right? Whenever we get bigger, we need to be able to deliver the right reports, the right costs, work with the finance team, work with the tech teams, deliver that scalability. And that I really enjoy. And I think you don't get that unless you've sort of seen all of those different sizes and stages of growth. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, there is a thing about the larger organization, the harder it is to be as close to the business, right? Like you just said, you're right now working hand in hand with every function every day, right? You're very close to it. Whereas you kind of lose a little bit of that. It's not impossible, obviously, but it just gets more challenging to do that and move quickly in a larger business as well. But on the other side, in your role, from speaking to your colleagues and saying you're fully hands-on in every aspect. which is also different, and that's not for everyone. I've seen CHROs go from very large multinationals to startups and jump on a call with me and be like, Chris, I can't do this. This is just insane. I'm like doing everything. And I was like, what did you expect? You just joined the startup. You just joined the startup. You're not going to have all of the resources. Have you? Was that been a challenge for you?
Yes, certainly. I think we've been through phases of absolute hyper growth. When I first joined, we'd more than doubled in size over the previous 18 months, and we've more than doubled in size in the 18 months I've been here. So, everything we did and designed has been broken already. It's really about everything, from designing payroll, pay changes, processes that work at scale, hiring at scale, through to now more developing some of the more, inclusion, engagement, benefit stuff to go alongside it as we're getting bigger. But I think more or less everything, we do, me and the team have to, dive in and really work out exactly what we want to do and how we want to do it.
Yeah. One of the things I'm interested in talk to you about is we're still having this big debate and conversation around, remote versus hybrid versus in office. Why do you think we're so obsessed with picking a model? It seems to be everyone's focused on what is the exact model. We're kind of like we're going full circle back to a one size fits all.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the role of HR isn't in deciding necessarily what that is. We should be a stakeholder in that conversation, but there isn't a best. I genuinely think different organisations have different cultures and different needs. So I really think we're fully remote, and that I First time I've done that, I found it challenging to start with, but I see what benefits we get out of that as an organization. I don't think it's better or worse than doing it a different way, but what I really see my role is executing on that decision to make sure we're designing an organization. All of our processes, all of our culture, all of our messaging needs to be around maximizing that decision to work remotely, so we can do things other businesses can't. Like, we can hire people anywhere in the world at a moment's notice because we've set up to do that. So that means we can access talent pools really, really quickly, and because that's what our business wants, right? Yeah. So, I think that's the role that HR needs to play in this, is to help formulate that decision, and then execute and maximize that on what you want.
Yeah. How do you, one of the big challenges I hear is the challenge of, like, how do you maintain or build that sense of belonging in a hybrid environment or remote environment, and also when people join, that they can feel, what does it mean to work here in terms of your culture, the values, and that they feel connected to the business? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a challenge we really see. Like, I mean, we're not the type of business that wants to, we don't have any walls, but if we did, we wouldn't plaster our values all over them. Like, we're really around, like, getting stuff done and making a difference. That would be how we would sort of, define what we want from people. So we make that clear to them, and we're not kind of, we're not here promising, all of the fluff that you might get with some other organizations in an in-house environment, because we can't do that. Like, there's no, the way we see that, we don't see it as value led. So for us, it's really about making sure people have super clear expectations on what good looks like for them, making it super clear to them that they have got a huge degree of freedom around how they work, when they work. Like, we're not going to be saying that you have to be at your desk, have to be, doing things in a particular way, and really focus on the output of individuals and teams. And when we can see that output isn't there, that's a question then, we need to bring up with relevant people. But really, the culture that we create and the value that we bring is we want people to feel independent and not absolutely tied to a 9 to 5. They can work around, the other things that they want to do in their life, be that, other entrepreneurial ventures they're involved in, be that family, be that exercise, be that whatever it is. We don't really mind.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. If you're hiring people and then telling them what to do, you kind of defeat the point. Like, if I'm hiring people so they tell me what to do, right? Because they're bringing a set of skills, and you're leading with trust from the very beginning, which is great. But at the same time, how do you then measure productivity and results to hold them accountable? What does that look like?
So that is what our leadership teams are, led to do. We are, very results, very metrics led business. So be it, the amount of content we want teams to do, be it the traffic they want to drive, be it the revenue that we want to see from particular teams. We are on those numbers, or our leadership teams are on those numbers. So we can highlight fairly quickly when things are not looking as we would want them to. Obviously there can be a myriad of factors that input that, not just in individual performances. But yeah, and I think tying to the other point you made there about, the fact that we're remote, one of the challenges that comes with remote work is how you train people. Like, that is a really difficult thing to do. So if I was leading and fully in-house office business, I would be really focused around, my apprenticeship scheme, hiring lots of graduates, and making sure that my managers are super good mentors, trainers of people, and then you can access, again, a different type of talent pool that we struggle with. We do have apprentices, we do, try and bring people in at early stage, but it's a much lower percentage than I think we could do, because it's really hard to train people from scratch if you're remote. It's much easier to sit next to somebody and show them how to do something they've never done before. So I think fitting back to that, like being very results driven in the way we want to be, it also, that is partly driven by the fact that we typically recruit people who have already done the job that we're paying them for. They're at that level already. They've got a bit of space to grow, but we're not looking for people on a really high career trajectory all the time. In all of our roles, we want people who have got the skills, experience, and can bring that to bear, because then it's much easier to say to somebody, you understand this role, you've done it before, this is the output we want to see, because they understand the context of that really, really well.
Yeah. The challenge of that, though, is that I suppose you kind of got a positive and negative. One is that's great because they're bringing in the skills, but the other is you're probably having to pay a premium for that to be able to do that. But I get your other side, that it can be, it's not obviously impossible, of course, but it is more challenging. Like in my day, right, you learn by doing, and by being in the office and mirroring and shadowing and seeing the work get done, sitting next to someone while they show you it. It is a bit more challenging. But then, of course, we've seen with the recent data and surveys that are out there that people are, one of the main drivers is their personal development. So how are you managing that to ensure that, okay, yes, you have the skills, but that person still needs to evolve, especially as skills become more and more out of date every day.
Correct. So we're building a academy around the sort of skills that we think are really critical to our business. So we've got a few streams of that. So we have a management stream, and then content and SEO are two really important parts of our business. So we've got learning streams around that we're working on, trying to build those courses ourselves. Nice. So it's very much about how we do things as opposed to just pure off the shelf technical ability, but this is the whole point that I think it's really important to make is, we are not going to be as good at that as other companies would be in an in-office or hybrid environment. Learning and development will be naturally harder for us, and that's where I think it's really important as a HR function to understand that we have constraints and limitations by this choice of work model, and therefore it's about maximizing what you do, understanding the compromises, because yes, you're right, we often recruit people pretty senior to do jobs that maybe you could get a bit more flex about. I mean, I think we're lucky in that we can recruit anywhere in the world, which helps with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it is understanding that all of these things are a trade-off, and you can't be, based on your work model, the best at absolutely all of these things, and you can't cherry pick it. And I think that's where sometimes HR functions go wrong, in terms of they want to be the best at something, but the work model that they're dictated by, like if you're trying to sell work-life balance as your number one thing, but you're asking people to be in central London 5 days a week, and you're not really, it's frowned on if you leave the office before 7:00, fine, that's great. I expect those companies pay pretty well, you would hope they would. And that's, again, it's just another example of that trade-off and how you maximize, the output that you want to see from your business.
Yeah, no, I see that. And those companies are definitely paying a lot more now, because people understand they have options elsewhere, right? Yeah. They have that. How do you balance the high performance that you're striving for with the flexibility without burning people out?
Yeah, I think the sort of burnout, particularly in a remote environment, it is difficult. Like we were having a conversation about this yesterday, about you just see when you just see somebody's game face, maybe they're not on calls particularly often, maybe you only see them for half an hour a week or whatever, So that is difficult to see what's behind that screen, like if there's anything invisible going on to you. So it comes down to A, measuring results, seeing if there's any like impact in that, and I think B, just making sure you have a pretty open mindset around that. I mean, you see when people are sending messages, you see when people are replying to stuff, and that's a difficult thing that came up in our latest survey around like the inability for some people to be able to switch off, and we're trying to give really clear messaging to people. We can't stop Slack pinging 24 hours a day, because your team might contain somebody in Japan, somebody in the States, people in Europe, like they're working around the sun, right? So you're never going to be able. Somebody will be writing to you at some point in the day, so we can't turn those messages off. You can control what you see, you can control what you do, and just making really clear on our expectations to people that we're not expecting them to work hard, not expecting them to count their hours, and we're not, it's not about, that sort of, being visibly working, 18 hours a day. You have to turn the measure off on that and make sure you're not sort of rewarding that behavior, and really focusing on, the results of the individual, and how well they're doing.
I think that just comes back to setting boundaries though, right? Like I've got team members all over the world and clients that we serve all over the world, but even something small as like, I've seen simple things like people putting in their email signature that these are the hours that I'm working and I'm not, and like, I'll get back to you during those. Just setting an expectation. Similar with our Slack groups and stuff like that, is the same thing. And a lot of those apps now have built-in mechanisms to say that this person's like, you can set it like that you're offline, etc. But that needs to be communicated by leadership and management, because you can have that, but people still feel that pressure to reply. Like naturally, they just, even though they know they shouldn't, they just do, because so that needs to be clearly communicated by the business, and it's part of your culture as well.
And again, like I referred to earlier, for us, it's really about like, having flexibility. Like I'm the sort of person, like I'm, if I'm awake and I see a message on, that I want to read, I can read it, and it doesn't take me out of what I'm doing. It doesn't particularly impact me, and I don't mind working early morning. I don't mind working late at night, and I don't mind walking the dog on the beach at lunchtime. I'm comfortable to do that, and that's a good balance for me as an individual, and that's the way I like to role model it with my team. I try not to send people messages at 7 o'clock in the morning, especially if it's asking people to do something rather than just saying well done on something. But yeah, that's what we have to try and role model as leadership, in terms of like understanding that, just because it suits me, it doesn't mean it suits somebody else. Everybody's got their own flavor on what suits them.
Yeah. How have your lead, one of the challenges that I have, and this is a personal challenge I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, how do you manage working with your leaders about how they're checking in with employees when they may have people on their team working in different time zones, in terms of how they're checking in with them, whether it's their one-to-ones or just checking in on performance? Like, how do you manage that when you've got people working on different time zones and hours, etc.?
Yeah, so we've tried to roll out a framework for this, with sort of monthly check-ins, quarterly reviews. We're a business that is generally, I would say, fairly anti-bureaucracy. So it tends to come with this is what we recommend, but you might want to do it in a different way.
So leaving up to the managers and the teams to make a decision.
Correct. We give a guidance and a framework, but everybody will have an example of where that guidance and framework doesn't work. So if it's like, I've worked with this person for the last 5 years. We're perfectly happy just to chat to each other on Slack. We haven't seen each other on a video call for 3 years, but everything's working fine. Right? I don't need to tell that person to do something differently if it's working, right? That's fine. But I think for new joiners, new managers, like, we're much keener. Here's a framework, adopt that, and most people are pretty receptive to that, and see and appreciate the benefit of doing it that way.
Yeah. What would you say is like one myth that you commonly hear about remote work?
That everybody is naturally more productive. I don't think that is a fact. If you go on LinkedIn, probably the second or third post you see every day is like, some diary of a remote worker versus the diary of a a commuting worker. I used to commute. I've done big commutes in jobs before. I always used to work on my commute, so I probably find that productive. And sometimes you can get distracted at home. Sometimes you can lose yourself in the wrong priority. Like, I think that is a common remote working challenge. And I think if you're not feeling it, it's a bit easier to not do very much.
Yeah.
I think you probably have more lull days working remotely than you do in the office. Obviously, you have the ability for more focus time, and being able to get through, read, write, do a solid, 1 or 2 hours work pretty undisturbed. But yeah, I don't think that naturally everybody who works remotely is, more effective and productive. I think you probably would find most office workers are probably a bit more productive, but it's the trade-off in other areas that I think balances that out.
Yeah. For me, it's like, it depends. So it's a type of work that I'm doing. So I prefer being in the office. So my team comes in every Monday, but the rest of the week they can work, how they want. But I enjoy being in the office with the team, sort of the collaboration, the creation, the challenging each other back and forth, and then actually, to your point, just sitting together around the table and getting the job done. Yeah, so there's something to be said about that. Like, we can all talk about it and go away remotely, but all being sitting at a table, just getting the job done together is super fun. But at the same time, if I then want to focus on sending a ton of emails or doing some deep work, then actually I'm way more productive at home doing that, because I don't get distracted every second by someone in the office. Yeah. So coming to grab to me for something. So to me, it's more around the type of work that I'm doing, as opposed to where I am when I'm doing it as well. So I'm with you on that. I do feel like it's a misconception. And again, if you want people to be in the office, I think that's where it comes down to being more intentional about why are people coming in. Because if they're coming in to do coding or sit on the laptop to send emails, then why are they there? It's like, that's the bit I think people get frustrated with. Yeah,
I mean, we had, my last company, we had a huge dilemma of, like, we went, obviously, like everybody did, we went fully remote in a instant during COVID, and we were pretty flexible. Like, I most people were in the office probably 4 days a week. I was in 2 or 3 just because I had a long commute. But we were a very international business, so you would tend to find, my team, when we came back in the office, were mainly abroad. So I would come into the office and then spend half my day in on
Zoom calls.
In a hot meeting, like not even the calls you could sort of take on the floor. Like, we're sitting there droning on about some system implementation that no one else wants to listen to or care about. So you just then spend like 4 hours in a room half the size of this with a 2-hour commute either way, and then the idea that you're like catching up with people, collaborating on other stuff, like it didn't always happen that way. So I agree. I mean, I was chatting to chap I know here, and he thinks his business have got it really well. They're like Monday, Tuesday, they're in the office. Monday's team building, Tuesday's project work. Like, you're told where you're sitting. Like, so you get given a desk number, so you're mixing up, and it's super like focused around, you need to work with this team this week because that's the biggest project you're working on. Non-negotiable. Everybody knows the rules, and then rest of the week they don't care. Like,
Nice. I like that.
Yeah,
It's a good balance.
Yeah, but it's like you say, it is. He is super clear why he needs to be in the office. It's not, and he gets it. Like, obviously, some days you'd rather not, but
that comes with the territory. I mean,
exactly.
We've come a long way from when we were younger, where there was no choice.
Correct. Yeah.
But now, I'm sure you're probably hearing this with people that you're recruiting. It's kind of like one of the first questions. If not the first question, it's not about salary, or it's more around, what are the ways of working? How do we work? Is like the first question before they even come through the door, right? As well.
And that's a, again, I think one underrated. If I was to say one underrated thing about remote work is how retentive it is. Right. So if realistically, like we pay well, anyway, but, it would typically take people getting, offers of 40% more to change to a different working model, even to go in a couple of days a week. And sometimes that's because people maybe have a bit of anxiety, or they're sort of on the a little bit on the agoraphobic edge or whatever like that. Definitely attracts people like that, but that makes it really retentive that you can work, contribute to society. Like, you're not sort of, you're still valued, you still have that home and work persona. But yeah, it is incredibly retentive once you've got people through the door and there. And I think that is a really, a positive. One thing we've really focused on is being able to be very straight with people about that, okay, go there and work for more money, go into the office 5 days a week, or, bluntly, butt your ideas up and deliver more. Because, we're giving you a pretty good benefit. Because again, there's a lot of chat about it, but I still would be surprised to see, that the numbers are as high as you would imagine by looking on LinkedIn about how many companies are actually fully remote. It's still, rarer than you think.
It is less than, and a lot of companies now are reversing, saying we need you back in another day, to the point where it's going to be 5 days and we're just back to kind of where we started as well.
And I don't mind that. Like, again, like looking at the sort of stuff that everyone posts on LinkedIn, I'll just get it clear, I'm no Elon Musk acolyte here. But, those emails that he's sent out about remote working, I agree with that philosophy for how he wants to run that business, right? We're building stuff in a factory, the people who are building stuff in a factory, they are here. If you're the software engineer who's coding that, if you're the HR business partner who's supporting that group, your support function to the people building the product, get in, work with them, see what they're doing, don't just be at home or on the beach. And that to me is exactly what we're saying. It's intentional, it's joined up, it's got a cohesive foundation to it, and you can either buy into that or not. And I think that's that's where it's about. Make that choice and then absolutely drive it through everything you do and make the best of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, it's not for everyone, and he understands that, and everyone else does. And same way that remote's not for everyone as well. I think as we come kind of full circle to, there is no longer a one size fits all, right? Those people, including me, that now have that flexibility to pick up my daughter from nursery because I can, and to be more present as a dad, and than I used to be when I was commuting back and forth a lot. A lot of people found that and changed their entire lives and the way they operated as a family during COVID. Didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait a minute, I don't want to give this up anymore. I enjoy this. And there will be companies out there that can provide that for them, and vice versa. There's others that are actually, I don't want to be at home because maybe I live at home alone, and that's very lonely. Right. I want that, and my only social interaction is work. And I've got friends like that became very depressed and anxious and isolated, and they love going to work. They can't wait because that's their way that they get energy from socializing as well.
And having the right sort of setup and environment at home. Like when we, when we moved to my last place to being fully remote in COVID, like one of our big learnings straight away was, we had a big customer service team in Malta, and all of these guys were living in shared.
It's a nightmare for them, basically.
And just and they're coming back and telling us about they've got some person they don't really know who's living in the flat, who's then just like out at 5 a.m. with all their stuff out on the kitchen table, and they've got nowhere to work, and they're literally like kneeling, laptop on the bed, and you're like that was a real learning for us. And we spent a lot of money on shipping desks and chairs out of the office to people so that they could have some way of working at home. And it's very some of us are lucky. I've got a dedicated space to work. If I didn't, I would find it extremely stressful.
Liam, before I let you go, what parting advice would you give to people that are on this journey, that's still trying to find that balance?
So I think that the most important thing for, as I've said, for any HR function, I don't think it is to remake that decision or to try and cherry pick different good things from different models. You've got a model, you stick to it, you've got some rules around that. So then it's just really looking at what is the best solution to each of those problems, and don't bring your legacy office policy process to the remote work. You can completely rethink it, and equally don't try and bring if you're in the office, it's pretty difficult to bring in some of the more remote type stuff into that. So it's really just understand the decision, focus on that, maximize the best out of it.
Amazing. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know you're probably going to be going for your nice long walk along the beach now, which I'm always jealous of. And I wish you all the best until next week, but thanks for taking the time out to join us.
Great. All right. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Cheers.